What are you ready for?
Should that happen?
Are you ready for what happens when you die?
What happens before you die?
Well, you live and you sin. And sometimes you pay taxes, not necessarily in that order. What about death? What happens when we die?
Just another journey.
So people go to heaven or hell on that journey?
Live it at the journey.
Huh?
So I'll leave it at the journey.
You just leave it up to the journey? Well, see, that's why I'm out here. I don't want people to guess about what happens.
What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I know that upon death, we're faced with judgment. We face judgment at death. We stand before the judgment seat of Christ, the judgment seat of God, and He looks at us and He determines whether or not we're worthy to enter heaven or whether or not we're going to go to hell. And there's only two ways. And there's only two ways to get into heaven. You have to be perfect, or you have to enter in underneath the price that was paid by somebody else.
Well, that just pretty much wipes out the whole world, don't it?
Every single person that's ever lived, absolutely. I'm Todd. What's your name?
Chuck?
Chuck, nice to meet you. So the question, Chuck, is if the journey, not if, since the journey ends with judgment, and it's either heaven or hell, where do you think you're going to go?
I don't know.
So, are you familiar with the gospel, Chuck? Have you heard the gospel? You've never heard the gospel? Lived in Minnesota your whole life? That's surprising, almost everybody. Did you go to church when you were younger? Were you ever a churchgoer? No?
I wasn't even baptized.
Baptism doesn't save. So you don't have to be baptized to go to heaven. You don't have to be baptized to go to heaven, Chuck. You have to repent and believe the gospel to go to heaven. And the reason that you have to repent and believe the gospel is because, like me, and like everybody, like you said, like everybody, we're all sinners. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. We've all told lies. We've all stolen. We've all cheated. We've all we've either actually committed adultery or we've thought adulterous thoughts in our head. And Jesus says that's the same as actually committing the act. Every single one of us is guilty of murder in the eyes of God. Even if we've never actually physically murdered somebody, God says we're guilty of murder. And the worst thing of it is that God commands us to love Him above everybody else. Everything and everybody, with every fiber of our being. And if we don't wake up in the morning thanking Him for giving us breath when what we deserve is for Him to take our lives, then we deserve His judgment and we deserve His wrath.
Fair enough.
And so what God did 2,000 years ago, because we cannot do that, we cannot keep His law perfectly, we cannot love Him the way we're supposed to, God sent Christ, God in the flesh, the second person of the Trinity. He sent Jesus Christ, the God-man, to come and pay that penalty for us on the cross. And so while He was on the cross, He suffered under the wrath of the Father. The wrath that God reserves for people who fail to repent and believe, Jesus Christ paid that penalty for all who would believe. And then in suffering that wrath, He died a physical death on the cross. He was buried, and He rose again 3 days later.
Ain't that some shit? That's why we got Easter.
That's where the celebration of Easter comes from in the church, absolutely.
Another paid holiday.
Huh?
Another paid holiday.
For some people, yeah.
Thank you.
So think about that.